tired for the recording myself, but anyway. Yeah, so welcome everyone to the Platonic Academy of Melbourne, our autumn salon. And I'd especially like to thank our host, Eleni, for having us here. And I thought we'd also just reflect a bit on how lovely it is that we can be here today talking about philosophy in such freedom, and that there's a lot of people in the world at the moment who don't have that sort of freedom. And we do know that Plato was very much, he didn't like democracy, but he didn't like tyranny, much worse. And so there's some people at the moment who are living under tyranny and war and famine and that sort of thing. So it would be nice just to reflect for a moment that that some people aren't quite as fortunate as us to be here today. All right. So thank you so much for coming. What was I going to say? Oh yes. So yeah, we only had one course this term, which was the Republic. And it has been a lot of fun. I thought we were winding down on Wednesday night, but I was kicking people out at 9 o'clock at night. I can't remember what we were talking about, the form of the same and making the distinction, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. But normally during our terms we have 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 courses. So we're kind of on a bit of a downward slide at the moment. And we're finding it hard to get new people to come along. So we're focusing a bit now on promotions, and I hope you guys maybe can help us with that. We've been talking to a promotions firm who's volunteered to help us out a little bit. This is Clemens Harvey from Harvey Taylor. And this is through Mary Matrakis. A lot of people will know Mary. She's on our board. And they've been helping us. And one of the things that we are pushing towards is better social media for old folks like myself. And so we are making a bit of a push there. And so if you are on social media, do have a look for our new Instagram. And also we're reviving our Facebook as well for all the grandparents around here. I have only grandparents use Facebook. So, yeah. But anyway, we do have a young social media guru here today. This is Jem over here, if you haven't met Jem. So Jem's helping us out with that. We're going to make a few reels for Instagram and so on. So if you do see us, do share and forward and like and comment and that sort of thing. I can see a few people who already do that. And you can actually post on our Facebook page, on our Facebook group, and a few people here do that, and sometimes some really good stuff has come up, like that scroll that was found that mentioned Plato and maybe where his grave is and whether he went into slavery and things like that. So fascinating stuff does come up. So check that out. So that's our promotions, but I'll promote now here. Next term we're doing Platonism and Christianity. And the term after that, we are going to run a new course. So we haven't done a new course for a while, but we're doing a new course called Plato's Myths. So we've got actually an Oxford book which has a collection of Plato's myths, if you don't have all the dialogues. And that's going to be run by 3 people in this room, Effie, Eleni, and Norman over here. So look out for that. That's in August. Platonism Christianity starts in, I think, the 17th or something of June. Early June, anyway. Here we go. Sorry? Yeah, 17th of June. That's right. Okay. So, imagine the scene. It's the early 7th century, where on the edge of the Sasanian Persian Empire, okay, and the Byzantine Empire is nearby. Now, Byzantium, just the century before, under Justinian, had finally closed the schools of philosophy in Athens and in Alexandria, which had been subsequently taken over by the Persians. So you had these two empires there, the Byzantium Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, whatever you call it, and you had the big Persian Sasanian Empire. They got into a big war. Lots of people died. They were impoverished. There was a massive famine. And travellers going through these areas say that, you know, it was just wastelands, that unpopulated and also uncropped. Then suddenly, the Arab conquest sweeps across Arabia and then Persia as well, and went on to expand after that. So in this environment, people converted very fast to Islam. One of the reasons they converted, people think, is because you didn't have to pay taxes if you converted. And so in this environment in the next few centuries, as we will hear, philosophy emerged, and an ecstatic religious cult, if you like, emerged and became very powerful and influential politically as well. And so you often wonder, where did this all come from? And we must remember that in this area, since Alexander the Great, which was 1,000 years prior, Hellenistic influence had been there, which of course includes the philosophies, which especially includes Platonism and neo-Platonism. So it's often hard to look at the Islamic world and try to determine, the sources of these things, because of course it's political with Sufism, because it needs to be seen to be Islamic. And if you start saying, well, it comes from somewhere else, well, that's problematic. Okay, so we've looked at Christianity, and it's very popular in our course how people see the connections between Christianity and Platonism and how Platonism influenced Christianity. But we've only looked in a very general way, spoken about it in a general way, about the influence of Platonism on Islamic philosophy, science, and on Sufism. So this is why I was so excited when I met Bruce and I discovered not only was he interested in Islamic philosophy and religion, but also that he was interested in looking at the Platonic connection. So Bruce is doing a PhD at the moment on a 17th century Islamic philosopher called Mullah Sadra. But today he's going to be speaking to us about the cult, if you like, of Sufism in Islam. So Bruce, welcome. I'll hand them out to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll hand them out. Thanks. Yeah, there you go.
So the handout is just some original text I'm going to talk about, because if I just read it out, it would be very difficult for people to follow, I think. So I just put it out. And don't worry, Chen Yu will read it for us when we need it. My presentation is about the connection between Platonism and Sufism. And it's actually a very difficult task, because, ancient philosophers, when they write their work, they don't make any citations. So it's very difficult to determine the causal relationship between Platonism and Sufism. So what I'm doing here now is more like a comparative studies to show that there's great structural correspondence between Sufism and neo-Platonism. And my presentation will be divided into 3 parts. So in the first part, I will just briefly introduce the historical context about the great translation movement. So I will introduce how Muslims received Greek philosophical source. And in the second part, I will briefly introduce the nature of Sufism. So Sufism is actually a very tricky term. It's almost like a philosophy. Like it covers just the various different branches of intellectuals and practice. But they nevertheless share some common beliefs. So we can talk about that. And in the last part, it's probably most overwhelming part, I'm going to talk about the wisdom of light. It is actually adopted from a Persian poet called Shabastari. So he recorded his mystical vision in a symbol of light. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it and draw the comparison between Shabastari's mystical vision to that of Plotinus. So first part. Actually, before I introduce the great translation movement, I want to introduce a little bit about history, or maybe just general impression before the great translation movement. So it's about Hellenistic period and late antiquity. And yeah, I'm not here a historian, so I use these 2 terms in a very loose sense. So for me, Hellenistic and late antiquity basically means the time after Alexander the Great's conquest to until around the 7th century. So it is this period. It is about 800 years old, I think, years, yeah. So, okay, to begin. In late antiquity, the hottest topic of philosophy is actually theology. So they have this very strong spiritual vibe. And the reason of that is probably because of the transformation of society. So the classic Greek city-state becomes a big empire. So people feel, I don't know, maybe a bit lost. So they are more likely to indulge into spiritual knowledge and practice. And the theology thus becomes the dominant topic of philosophy. And so there's 2 types of theology. And this distinction is my own, so it is just a compromise distinction. So the first, I call it philosophical theology. And it is exemplified in Aristotle's metaphysics. So theology, in this sense, is a branch of metaphysics, which is the most specific science, because the object of this science is just one entity, namely God. But Aristotelian God is probably not religious God, as you might think about. So for Aristotle, God is just a perfect entity, and that's it. It's not an object for worship, and it's not an object for religion. And another type of theology is what I call religious theology. And it is more close to the later medieval theology. So thanks to the military expansion of Alexander the Great, the Oriental religions and wisdom becomes more and more important and well known to Greek intellectuals. So as Hans Jonas describes, there is something he called the Greek conceptualization of Eastern thought, which offers a new possibility of bringing to light the meaning of Oriental heritage. So basically, this process is they use Greek philosophical terminology to reconstruct and to explain the Oriental culture. And to be fair, this process is actually not a very new thing. it already happens at the age of Plato, I think. So, for example, can you read the first quotation for us?
Diogenes Laertius, Book 1, Section 8. In the first book of his dialogue on philosophy, Aristotle declares that the Magi, ancient Zoroastrian priests, are more ancient than the Egyptians. Furthermore, he asserts that the Magi believe in two principles, namely a good demon and an evil demon, the one called Zeus or Ahura Mazdes, or Mazda or Ahura Mazda, the other Hades or Arimanius Arima.
So you see, by the time of Aristotle, he already have this clear understanding of Eastern religion. And this essentially, Diogenes essentially paraphrased this from Aristotle's dialogue, which named On Philosophy. And this dialogue was believed to be written in the early stage of Aristotle's life. So by the time Aristotle was still a student at the Platonic Academy. So this probably shows that Plato, he actually knows Zoroastrian very well. And I think later, during the Hellenistic period, one of the philosophers actually criticized Plato, saying his Republic actually was inspired by Zoroastrian source. But we don't know because there's no Zoroastrian source survived today, I think. But the argument is Plato just constructed a society where a philosopher should be the king. And they argue this is actually not a new thing, because in the Persian culture, the Magi should be the ruler. And what Plato did is just using philosopher to replace Magi. So, but I don't know. There's no clear established evidence. This is just a hypothesis. Anyway, so this demonstrates Greek actually has a very long and consistent interest in Oriental wisdom. But it was until the late antiquity, with the development of logos. So logos in this context means abstract concept and systematic reasoning, which brought this process to maturity. So this intellectual tool, one of the humanity's greatest discoveries, was then available to East, enhanced their self-expansion. So although the impact took time to manifest, so the impact is eminent, but it still completely changed how people think. So previously, Eastern thought is relied on images, symbols, and myths and rituals rather than logical explanations. And now, thanks to Greek's philosophical heritage, they start to express their religion in a more, so to speak, philosophical and rationalistic way. And the product of this process is what I call religious theology, such as Gnosticism and the cult of Hermes. It is kind of different to philosophical theology, as in the essence, religious theology just uses philosophical language to express Oriental religion and wisdom. But again, as I said, the distinction between philosophical and religious theology is just a compromised distinction. In reality, they often mix together. So this is the general situation or impression before the Great Translation Movement. And the Great Translation Movement is actually happening in the 8th century, thanks to the rise of Abbasid dynasty and the foundation of Baghdad. This is actually a turning point of Islamic culture, because the ruler of Abbasid is a very open-minded guy. So he actually fought for the translation movement. And I'm going to introduce this philosopher, Al-Kindi. He is actually a very interesting figure, because he is the first Muslim who called himself philosopher. like before him, there's no philosopher in Islamic culture. And he is in charge for the translation movement. So by the time there are two circles, one is led by Al-Kindi, and another one is actually led by Ibn Ishaq. And what is more interesting is actually Kindi's circle is in charge to translate philosophical text, and Ishaq's circle is in charge to translate scientific sources. So it's a bit different, the area. And Al-Kindi is a very, like, so to speak, strange figure, because he is in charge to editing all the translation produced in his circle. And he has his own philosophical vocation. Like, he wanted to represent the Greek philosophy as a coherent whole in order to against other theological school by the time. So, like, in order to against the Kalam theology, which is a native Islamic theology. So the translation is not, well, it's not translation in a strict sense. It's more like a paraphrase. So they often you add an original modification to Greek source. One of the example is a work called The Theology of Aristotle. So this work is actually attributed to Aristotle, and it's a very influential, and probably is the most influential source of Platonic ideas in Arabic-speaking world. But this work is actually not Aristotle's, it's Plotinus' work. So the Al-Kindi circle translated the last three books of Plotinus' Aeneas into Arabic, and attributes it to Aristotle. So it's, yeah, I know it's a bit strange to do that. And so another similar thing is actually Proclus. Like Proclus's work, okay, I should probably introduce Proclus a little bit. He is the last headmaster of Platonic Academy, and he is probably the last Greek philosopher. And he writes lots of books about Plato's theology and Plato's dialogue. And one of the books is called The Element of Theology, and it is translated into Arabic under the name of the Book of Pure Good, and it is also attributed to Aristotle. Yeah, what is more interesting is this book is actually later, the Book of Pure Good, later was translated into Latin under the title of the Book of Causes, and it's also attributed to Aristotle. And Thomas Aquinas, he actually wrote a complete commentary on this book. So in the book, I think Aquinas actually knows this book was written by Proclus, but probably for some political reason, he remained silent, calls this book, and calls Aristotle the author of this book. So yeah, it's a bit strange. The translation is more like a commentary, maybe, instead of loyal translation. Okay, now we move to the next part, which is Sufism. So Sufism is another, like I said, is very ambiguous term. It is almost as ambiguous as the term philosophy. But for philosophy, everyone knows the etymology of philosophy, so it means love, wisdom. But for Sufism, we don't even know its etymology. So Sufism in Arabic is called as-Sufiya or at-Tasawwuf. So some people believe this term is actually come from Greek words for wisdom. So Sophia. Yeah. But I don't think this is the right answer. It's not likely. Other people says this come from an Arabic word suf. So suf actually means woolen garment. So they believe the first generation of Sufis, they always wear this woolen garment. So people start to call them Sufi because of their clothes. Yeah, and no one knows how Sufi like where or how Sufi is originated. Some say Sufi is actually deeply influenced by Christian mysticism, but no one knows. And some people believe Sufism is actually originated from Prophet Muhammad, and because they think Prophet Muhammad is the most perfect human being, and the quest of Sufi is to become like Muhammad as much as possible. But it's all just a hypothesis. No one knows the answer. I think in 11th century, one of great Sufi masters says, like Sufism used to be a term, used to be a reality without a name, and now it is a name without a reality. So you see, it's a very confusing term here. But anyway, although Sufism and their order may differ greatly, they nevertheless share certain common belief. So the essential goal for Sufi is to purify their soul and to reunite with God. And in order to achieve that, Sufi developed a very complex theoretical and practical system. So now I'm going to introduce a little bit about Sufi's theory. So Sufi believe they derive all their wisdom from the teaching of Quran and Hadith. So Quran is the essential sacred book for Muslims. It is believed to be the word of God. And Hadith is more like the teaching of Prophet Muhammad. So you see the difference. Quran is the word of God, and Hadith is the word of Prophet Muhammad. Mm-hmm. And also interestingly, they believe Torah and the Gospel, they are as important as Hadith, because Torah is the words of Prophet Moses, and the Gospel is the word of Prophet Jesus. So, and although they claim their wisdom comes from Quran and Hadith, but the way they interpret this text is by no means literal. It's more like very spiritual. They maybe just adopt one word from Quran and develop a whole system just based on this one word. And some people say they maybe like misunderstood the word of God, but they have a very strong argument. Like they say Quran is the word of God. So when God actually revealed it to Prophet Muhammad, he must already know all the possible interpretations of his words, right? So Sufi's interpretation is actually valid, and it is actually concealed to common people. So common people can only understand the literal meaning of Quran, but Sufi, they can understand the spiritual message of God. So, and I'll introduce a little bit about it is called Shahadat, and I believe you might heard it in the documentary of the protest of Palestine. Like they always say, there's no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. And the Sufi actually gives a very, very original interpretation of this Shahadat. So the first part of Shahadat, there's no God but God. So Sufis believe this actually differentiates between the real, so God, and the unreal, the world and everything other than God. This declination have two parts, so a negation, not God, and the affirmation, but God. So the negation denies the inherent reality of the world and the self. So even human ego is not real in this sense. While the affirmation confirms the ultimate reality of God. So essentially it asserts that there is no true reality except God, and all perceived reality are secondary and dependent on God. And the second Quranic verse, and the second part is saying like Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God. It actually determines the place of human being. So human is special in this universe, in the sense they have their own free will to believe in God. And and their interpretation just a note here. They don't think like the reality and our world is completely unreal. but only in a sense it is not as real as God. So they believe our reality have two faces. One is face to God, so it means this face is a sign of God, which is a reminder of the existence of God. And another is a face to nothingness. So this is actually the non-existence part of the world. So it means the world is not real. It's also a reminder. So in the Quran, there's a verse that says everything is preaching but His face. So this implies, just like I said, the existence of all things is transcendent within God's internal being. So the Sufi interpretation actually emphasizes that God's reality is so profound and nothing else truly exists alongside Him. And the second shahada, like I said, is recognition of divine revelation. So the second part says Muhammad is the messenger of God, indicates that Muhammad, as well as the Quran he brought, are direct manifestation of the divine. And this highlights the importance of revelation in guiding humanity. So prophets are sent to reveal God's guidance and mercy. And without such revelation, people remain lost and in ignorance and illusion. So the Quran refers its verse and other divine revelation as a sign. So it actually uses the same term for the things of the universe. So like I said, everything in this universe, only one hand reminds you the existence of God, and also reminds you the nothingness of this universe. So you see, this is a very paradoxical understanding of reality. And another thing I want to mention is the concept of Eastern and Western faces. So everything is preaching but His face. So Sufi uses this metaphor of the Eastern face and the Western face of things to explain this duality. The Western face is devoid of divine presence, while Eastern face shines with it. Most people say Western face and remains unaware of the divine reality in everything. And in contrast, Prophet and the great Sufis sees the Eastern face, perceiving God in all things. And this is especially interesting in the sense of philosophy, because the term East in Arabic is ishaq. It also has a meaning of illumination. So Muslim Platonists actually loves this term because it both have Platonic meaning, like Platonic light, and also have Quranic meaning. So the creed of belief in this context just serves as a declaration of God's absolute reality, helping to distinguish the illusory from the real. And on a practical level, so the Sharia it provides, so Sharia means the Islamic law, which is derived from Quran, at least they believe so. And the Sharia provides guidance for living in accordance with revealed truth, to ensuring human action aligns with divine will, with the divine will. So Sufi's view of reality is actually emphasizes a deep conscious discernment between the real and unreal, and guiding individuals towards spiritual perfection through the teachings of the Quran. So you see here the difference between Sufis and Greek philosophers is that Sufi, in this sense, is they are radical monism, only recognizes one and a single reality. While ancient Greek philosopher, they may be monism in some sense, but they are more like a pantheistic. So everything is God, but there's not just one single reality. There's multiple reality, maybe in some sense, like Platonic forms. And now we move to Sufi practice. And this is, so as mentioned, Sufi only recognizes one reality, which is God, and everything else is just a sign or veil of God. So the quest of Sufi is to know God by means of unveiling, by means of to remove all the distractions and hindrance. So in Sufi metaphysics, the true understanding of reality involves seeing every aspect of the world as manifestation of the underlying absolute reality. So this vision of reality is achieved through deep spiritual experience, knowing as inner witness, and tasting, presence, and illumination. And this spiritual exercise is usually divided into two stages. So the stage of fana and the stage of banka. So fana in Arabic means annihilation. It is a term, Sufi use this term to denote the annihilation of ego. So when they have this mystical vision, they will say everything is annihilated, including the ego. So the phenomenal world is full of multiplicity, of many different forms and appearance. While these forms are expression of the absolute reality, seeing only multiplicity without recognizing the underlying unity. So they actually misses the essence of reality. By experiencing the reality through self-realization, through fana, means directly perceiving absolute reality before it splits into different forms. So for this to happen, the ego must transcend its own limit. So you see, even individual's ego creates duality, like between I and God. This is duality, which is unacceptable for Sufis. So the Sufi masters just emphasize the importance of distancing oneself from the ego and focusing entirely on the absolute reality. So, and then the stage after fana is banka, which can be rendered as the survival of consciousness. So where one's ego returned from total annihilation, and although one's consciousness returned from annihilation, and everything is back to the normal sense, they cannot see the world in the same way. So before it, they see the world as multiplicity, but now they can see this world as multiplicity in unity. So, but in principle, their mystical experience or mystical vision is ineffable. So, but they nevertheless figure out a way to express it through symbols. And one of commonly adopted symbol is light. And the symbol of light is so popular is probably because one of the Quranic verse. So in this Quranic verse, which is a second quotation in the handout, Chen, you can read it for us.
Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. The example of his light is like a niche within which is a lamp. The lamp is within glass. The glass as if it were a pearly white star lit from the oil of a blessed olive tree, neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil would almost glow, even if untouched by fire. Light upon light, Allah guides his light whom he wills, and Allah presents examples for the people, and Allah is knowing of all things.
So you see this verse, and this verse is difficult to understand. Like someone say it is influenced by Manichaeism or Zoroastrian. Because, I should mention this point. Prophet Muhammad called himself the seal of prophet. But just 300 years before him, another prophet, Mani, also calls himself the seal of prophet. So lots of people say Islam actually draws lots of stuff from Manichaeism and Zoroastrianism. But again, it's very difficult to determine the actual connection between these religions. So this remains a hypothesis. And as we shall see, in Sufi tradition, the Quranic light is soon mixed with Platonic light, because light is also a very important symbol in Platonic philosophy. As we see in the cave allegory, light is a representation of reality. So, and we'll move to the last part, the hikmah of light. So hikmah in Arabic means wisdom. It is also a word to denote philosophy. And in the early centuries of Arabic, they just use the Greek word falsafa to denote philosophy. But later, they just abandon the term falsafa and start to use hikmah to denote philosophy. So hikmah means more like intuitive wisdom instead of discursive reasoning. So you can see this transition here. So Muslim is more close to the mystical side, and they are more interested in the mystic elements in ancient Greek philosophy instead of analytic elements. So we are very lucky as we have the first-hand report of a Fana and Banka experience from a famous Sufi master, Shabastari. And he is a follower of Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi is a very important figure. People call him Shaykh al-Akbar, so means the great master, because he almost changed the thinking pattern of Muslim philosophy. So he is like Kant in the history of Muslim philosophy. And I think you guys might be more interested in another title of Ibn Arabi. So people actually call him the son of Plato. So because people think Ibn Arabi was deeply influenced and almost in the essence a Platonist. So as the follower of Ibn Arabi, Shabastari is also influenced by Platonism. And then now I have a paragraph of Shabastari from his Garden of Mystery. You can read it for us.
Shabastari, the Garden of Mysteries. Mysterious. I saw myself present in a world of light. Mountains and deserts are iridescent with lights of all colors. Red, yellow, white, blue. I was experiencing a consuming nostalgia for them. I was as though stricken with madness and snatched out of myself by the violence of the intimate emotion and feeling of the presence. Suddenly I saw that the black light was invading the entire universe. Heaven and earth and everything that was there had wholly become black light, and behold, I was totally absorbed in this light, losing consciousness. Then I came back to myself.
You see, Shabastari employs a very interesting symbol. So black light, it stands for the dominant and overwhelming light of reality. And because this light is too intense, so it becomes as the deepest darkness for human eye. So, and I think Plato also employed the similar symbols in his Republic. So, because I think everyone here have read Plato's Republic, so I just quote a paragraph from Ibn Rushd in his commentary of Plato's Republic. So, Chen, can you read it?
Ibn Rushd, Commentary on Plato's Republic, 515e to 516a. As for the philosophers, they are those who have gone out of that cave into the dazzling light and see the things in their reality in the sunlight. Just as the eyes of a man, when he suddenly comes out of a cave into the sunlight, are dimmed, and he cannot see anything, so in the same way with this category of men, that is, those who are by nature disposed to philosophy, it is impossible that we should throw ourselves rashly with them into the study of those sciences in which it is difficult to abstract and examine the intelligible.
So you see, Plato also has a similar idea. So the intense light of reality will blind people. So the most intense light somehow appears to be the deepest darkness. And just a small digression here. So Aristotle in his metaphysics actually have a similar paragraph. I can't remember exact words, but he's saying, just like the eyes of bat to the sun, so is human's intellect to the true reality. And I think Ibn Rushd's commentary here is actually influenced by this Aristotelian understanding, because Ibn Rushd, he is a very loyal Aristotelian philosopher. And it's interesting because Ibn Rushd, he is a very important figure for Catholic theology, but not as important for Islamic theology. He is basically ignored by Islamic philosophers, but somehow very popular in the Latin West. And even nowadays, I think there's a group of people call themselves Averroist. So Averroist is a Latinized name for Ibn Rushd. So he's very influential philosopher. So, like I said, the most intense light appears to be deepest darkness. So it is also this intense light can even devour the observer, so result in total annihilation of the consciousness. So, and here Shabbastary's mystical vision was probably inspired by neo-Platonism. For there's actually significant parallels between Shabbastary's mystical experience and Plotinus' mystical experience. So I have quoted a passage from Plotinus' Aeneas, where Plotinus actually records his mystical experience. Chen, you can read it.
Plotinus Aeneas 4.8.1. Often after waking up to myself from the body, that is, externalizing myself in relation to all other things, while entering into myself, I behold a beauty of wondrous quality, and believe then that I am most to be identified with my better part, that I enjoy the best quality of life, and have become united with the divine and situated within it, actualizing myself at that level, and situating myself above all else in the intelligible world, following on this repose within the divine, and descending from intellect into acts of calculative reasoning, I ask myself in bewilderment, how on earth did I ever come down here? And how ever did my soul come to be enclosed in a body, being such as it has revealed itself to be, even while in a body?
Yeah, the interesting here is Plotinus actually described his mystical experience without using the symbol of light. But in the corresponding part in the Arabic translation, so in the theology of Aristotle, the translator actually modifies Plotinus' mystical experience by using the image of light. So Chen, you can read it the next.
Theology of Aristotle 1:27. Often have I been alone with my soul, and have doffed my body and laid it aside, and become as if I were naked substance without body, so as to be inside myself, outside all other things. Then do I see within myself such beauty and splendor as I do remain marveling at and astonished, so that I know that I am one of the parts of the sublime, surpassing, lofty, divine world, and possess active life. When I am certain of that, I lift my intellect up from that world into the divine world, and become as if I were placed in it and cleaving to it, so as to be above the entire intelligible world, and seem to be standing in that sublime and divine place. And there I see such light and splendor as tongues cannot describe nor ears comprehend. When that light and splendor overwhelm me, I have no strength to endure it. I descend from mind to thought and reflection. When I enter the world of thought, thought veils that light and splendor from me, and I am left wondering how I have fallen from that lofty and divine place, and am come to the place of thought, when my soul once had the power to leave her body behind and return to herself, and rise to the world of mind, and then to the divine world until she entered the place of splendor and light, which is the cause of all light and splendor.
You see, so this is actually very mysterious. Like lot of scholars trying to figure out what happened here. Like why a translator decided to use light to rewrite Plotinus' mystical experience. And there's lots of hypotheses, but here I want to offer my own hypothesis. So I believe it is because the translator actually understands Plato's and Plotinus' work very well, and so he decided to use it to make Plotinus' mystical experience more Platonic instead of like Plotinus' own. So. It's interesting because people saying the translator of this work is actually a Christian, so he's not Muslim. He is hired by Al-Kindi to do all this work. So there is maybe Christian influence here, but it's not related to our topic. So the cave allegory, just a few sentences after this paragraph, Plotinus actually offers his unique interpretations of Plato's cave allegory. So I also quote that paragraph here. Can you read it for us?
Plotinus Aeneas 4.8.1. Well, it will be plain that he does not say the identical thing in every instance, so that one might easily discern his intention, but granting in all cases scant respect for the sensible world, and blaming the soul for its association with the body. He declares that the soul is in bondage, and has buried itself within it, and that the pronouncement made in secret rites is a great one, to the effect that the soul is imprisoned here. And his cave, like the cavern of Empedocles, is to be taken, it seems to me, to be referring to this universe, seeing as the release from the shackles and the ascent from the cave, he declares to be the journey towards that which is intelligible.
So you can say Plotinus' interpretation of cave allegory is very different to ours. Like nowadays we think cave allegory is actually an analogy which aims to describe different levels of reality and knowledge, or it's just a allegory to denote the situation of philosopher, as a philosopher is those who see the intelligible world. But Plotinus actually understood it in a more soteriological way. So the cave allegory is actually like an initiation for people, for them to achieve their salvation. And he also mentions Empedocles' cave. So because the cave is actually the image and symbol of cave is actually also employed by Empedocles in his fragment titled Purification, and which now we only have few fragments. And the fragments I quoted here is actually recorded by Porphyry. So Porphyry is a student of Plotinus, and he was also the editor of Plotinus' Aeneas. So the Aeneas we have today is actually edited by Porphyry. And Porphyry has a very interesting book called On the Cave of the Nymphs in the Odyssey. So it is a book where he tried to use Platonic philosophy to interpret Odyssey, the epic written by Homer. Because there is just lots of cave image in Greek culture, and the ancient Greek believe they all trying to convey a same message. And the purification is concerned with the fall of man and with the practice necessary for his restoration. So it denotes the circle of reincarnation. So Chen, you can read. Yeah.
Empedocles, 119 to 123. From what honor, from what a height of bliss have I fallen to go about among mortals here on earth? We have come under this roofed-in cave, the joyless land.
So the quotation describes the fall of man. So interestingly, Empedocles described the mortal realm as a roofed-in cave. So some people believe Plato's cave allegory is actually inspired by Empedocles, and it is one of the Orphic tradition, named katabasis. So katabasis actually means descent. So Greek have this tradition, like the poet somehow have this mystical vision and descended into the underworld and say all those strange things. And Orphic is also ancient Greek cult. I'll just summarize it in one sentence. So the goal of Orphic is to purify one's soul and to disengage one's material existence so they can escape these endless reincarnations. So you see here, Empedocles is actually offers a soteriology, like trying to escape from the endless rise and fall, namely the reincarnation. So, Empedocles believe that the cave is actually represented a passage through a new womb. So while one could be reborn after passing through it into the underworld, this rebirth would grant the individual new powers and enlightenment. And Plotinus, as a philosopher who followed both Empedocles and Plato's, saw both caves as a symbol of the journey of the soul towards enlightenment. He believed that philosophical practice could help the soul to escape the circle of reincarnation and return to its true nature. So according to Plotinus, philosophical practice involving experiencing moments of ascent and descent, mirroring the metaphysical experience of the soul arising and falling back into matter. This circle repeats in the soul's many lives, and the philosophy actually helps the soul escape this circle through ascetic practice. Plotinus sees the physical world as a kind of tomb or prison for the soul. So he sees this physical world as the cave of the soul. And the philosophical practice actually offers a path to liberate people from this imprisonment. So, yeah, this is also a very popular way in antiquity to understand Plato's philosophy. So, as I said, in Orphic tradition, the ultimate goal is to escape the reincarnation. What Plato doing here is to argue that philosophy is actually the appropriate way for people to escape reincarnation. So Plato here is to using philosophy to replace all those mystical rituals in Orphic traditions.
Yeah.
So in this sense, Plato's teaching align with those of mystery religions, which also teach that the soul is imprisoned in the body. So both Plato and the mystery religion offers a way to escape the imprisonment, with philosophy being one of such paths. And the Empedocles cave symbolized as a similar concept representing a place where one can awaken to the invincible world of the divine life. So both Empedocles and Plato regarding cave as a symbol of enlightenment and liberation, and both philosophers see cave as a metaphor for the journey of the soul towards enlightenment, with philosophical practice offers a way to escape the circle of reincarnation and to return to the true nature of the soul. So I think that's why the translator of Plotinus' work decided to modify Plotinus' mystical experience with light, because Because for Muslims, light is more familiar image and symbol, but a cave is not. There's no special meaning of cave in Muslim culture. So in order to avoid confusions, so they decide to delete the image of cave, but to reinforce the image of light. So in the corresponding paragraph in the Theology of Aristotle, so Chen, you can read it.
The Theology of Aristotle, 17 to 33. Now, Empedocles says that the souls were in the high and sublime place, and when they erred, they fell into this world. Slit was a fugitive from the anger of God, that he too came to this world. For when he came down to this world, he came to help those souls whose minds have become contaminated, and became like a madman, calling men at the top of his voice, and bidding them reject this world and what is in it, and to go back to their own original world, the high and sublime. And he bade them ask pardon of God, that they might thereby attain the ease and well-being that was their state before.
So you see the corresponding paragraph here completely deletes the image of cave. And they believe this paragraph is actually a solid evidence that the translator was a Christian, because it mentioned the concept of original sin here. So this is one of the possibility. So
it's a paraphrase of Proclus.
yeah,
This theology of Aristotle is a paraphrase of Proclus, is that right?
no, it's of Plotinus.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Plotinus, yeah.
So this paragraph of the Theology of Aristotle actually meant to be translation of the paragraph I mentioned before, where Plotinus analyzes Plato's cave allegory.
Yeah.
But they just completely delete the image of cave.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I think like they're doing it on purpose, because for Plato's cave allegory, the image of cave and the image of light is equally important, because cave denotes the situation of a normal human being, and light denotes the divine realm of Platonic forms, right? So, but just as I said, they want to use Greek philosophy as a weapon against other theological school at the time. So they don't want to create too much like confusion here, nor they want too much Greek elements here. So that's probably why they decide to delete the image of cave, but keep the image of light, because image of light also employed countless times in the Quran. So they feel more comfortable to use that. So you see there is this great significance and similarities between Sufism and neo-Platonism. So I think just like they say Plato and Plotinus, they reconstruct Orphic tradition in the light of philosophy. So is Sufi reconstruct the philosophy of Plato and neo-Platonism in the light of Quranic revelation. But as I said, this might seem very far-fetched because there is no clear causal connection between two traditions, because they just don't make citations and they do not acknowledge neo-Platonism philosophers. So all we have here is just a hypothesis. But I hope my presentation shows the similarities between these two schools. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. That was just fantastic, wasn't it? I mean, just the movement between the east and the west. So you got you got it going east and then coming back to Thomas Aquinas with an Aristotelian title. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that the way Aristotle was used, because of course and Thomas Aquinas' time, this is when the universities started up in Western Europe. In Thomas Aquinas' time, and also in the Orthodox Church over in Constantinople, there was a real problem with Plato, because Plato had a theology, and the Trinity, which comes from Platonism, right, but had this particular kind of, from our point of view, perverse form, was such a problem. There was so much controversy, so many fights over it, and such a problem that the theology of the one God and Creator was so problematic that, using that label, Aristotle, because Aristotle's science was kind of more atheistic. Yeah. You know, you could introduce Plotinus, you could introduce Platonic ideas without causing too much upset.
Yeah, and I think another problem is Aristotle never write a independent book for theology. So maybe the Muslim translator feels there is a necessity to produce a book of theology for
Aristotle.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well,
but Aristotle actually calls metaphysics theology. So theology, Aristotle never used this term metaphysics. It is adopted by his editor 300 years after the death of him. Right?
Oh, well, I always heard one of the reasons maybe wasn't the Library of Alexandria, it was the volume that came after the physics. Meta, as in after. Yeah. But it is, above physics.
Above physics.
In terms of, the way we use it, I think.
Yeah. And plus, people in late antiquity and in Islamic age, they just very obsessed with theology, right? So they feel like it may be a very unfortunate thing for such a great philosopher to not write a book on theology.
Well, that's perhaps another reason.
Yeah, so they just decided to make one for him.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so have we got any questions for Chris, Mark?
Just one quick comment and question. A comment, I thought maybe because some of Muhammad's revelations took place in a cave, maybe they didn't want to have a negative image of a cave being put forward in there.
Oh yeah, that's one of the possible reasons.
So we might need to repeat. Are we still recording, Jen?
Yeah.
So the question was, or the comment was that some of Muhammad's revelations were in a cave, so there is some imagery there for it in Islam.
Yeah, so that maybe these writers didn't want to, when putting forward the translation, they didn't want to, Empedocles didn't want to have a negative image of a cave as being where ignorance.
Yeah. Thank you. This is actually very helpful. I'll use it in my essays. So,
I was kind of thinking about Nietzsche, when Nietzsche goes to the cave to become enlightened, kind of thing. And it's that inversion of the Platonic myth. And obviously Nietzsche's doing it on purpose. But in this case, like you said, maybe they were avoiding that because they didn't want to be associating the prophet of the religion with being unenlightened.
Yeah, when it comes to prophet, things becomes very sensitive. There is a very great philosopher in the history of Muslim philosophy called Suhrawardi, and he is actually the founder of Islamic neo-Platonism, but he was executed when he was 40 because people think Suhrawardi actually claims to be a prophet, so people just decide to kill him for this reason. So it's very sensitive to say any negative things of prophet. Yeah, so I think this reason is actually valid. It's very helpful. Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Norman? Not yet. Just working on it. Okay. Martin again. Yeah.
Well, you were talking about the difference between Islamic philosophy of unity and maybe the Greeks weren't quite so to unity, because you said the forms are something separate.
Yeah.
But it's not always thought of something separate. I mean, and also, I was thinking of Ibn Arabi as bringing in multiplicity through the multiplicity of the names of God, and they're sort of attributes of God. So you could think of them as forms, maybe. So maybe there's not such a difference between the philosophy of Ibn Arabi and Greek philosophy, which includes forms.
So the question is around strict monotheism and like a polytheism sort of thing, whether like that, what you were saying, and I picked this up too, Bruce, where you're saying, well, with the forms, maybe it's more polytheistic. Is that yeah, and
like a pantheism.
Oh, pantheist. Beg your pardon. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, some people interpreted, Plotinus, I think, thought that the forms were ideas in the mind of God. So that'd be another way of unifying them.
Yeah. It's actually common practice during Middle Platonism, where they think the Aristotelian God is a real God, and the Platonic form is inside the head of God. But the Plotinus just don't like this. They think God should be beyond being instead of being a perfect being. So I think for Plotinus things may be different. Okay. But the comment you just made is actually valid, because during the medieval period, there is a specific science called science of angel. So they believe each angel is one of the name of God, and the name of God is actually the archetype of all mortal things. So the name of God for them is actually identical to Platonic forms. Yeah. But they just don't believe Platonic forms are independent substance, but it's just a name of God, a part of God. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people doing the Republic course can sort of see that too. We can give many names. We call it the form of the same, the form of one, whatever else. But it's the ultimate is unnameable. And so, I would like to say to you, Bruce, when you were talking about maybe Platonism being a bit more, just not polytheistic, pantheist. I would like to, I push Plato's view that this form of the good, the unhypothetical first principle, as we've just read in the Republic and stuff, is pushing very strongly towards a very formalistic, a very abstract, if you want to use that term, monotheism. And in my view, that influenced Christian monotheism or Judeo-Christian Hellenistic monotheism. And so therefore, that reinforces more your position, which is that this relates closer to, Plato, I think. The Sufis do.
Right. Yeah. But the Sufis, they're kind of more radical. Like for Plato, they believe there's a different hierarchy of the reality. So even the material existence is to some extent real. But for Sufism, they only recognize one reality.
Okay.
And all other reality are, so to speak, not reality. They're just the shadows of the true reality.
Okay, we can talk about more, but it's still real. Your essential reality is still real. It's just expressing the forms, and the form of the forms is the form of the good.
Yes.
So I think the neo-Platonists have these hierarchies, and then Christianity with angels and everything and all like that. But with Plato, I think in terms of what's your sensible experience, where you're seeing shadows in the wall, but the shadows in the wall are expressing the forms, and then he goes to the form of form. So I feel like that's very strongly monotheistic in that abstract notion, not a bearded man in the sky, but in that very abstract notion of a single unity that's expressed or emanates down.
Yeah. And I think in Republic, Plato actually criticizes the Greek gods, right? I can't remember the exact passage, because I think where he says that God cannot be evil, so the Greek gods, they are not like so morally right for Plato.
Yes, well that's a view in the academy that that basically Plato was, and we'll do this in Platonism and Christianity as well, where where Plato's getting rid of all that, and he's saying gods have to be good, right? If you're telling a story about the divine or divine being, that it must be false unless that divine being is all good. And so then you just go back, you don't have to, just go back and you look at all those Greek myths and you think, there's a lot of bad there, so, and he's pushing it aside. He's pushing it all aside.
I do think Socrates, at least in Plato's account, does believe in the gods. Like, why else at the end of his life does he ask Crito to sacrifice a cock to Asclepius? And when during the apology, he says to Melephus, don't you think I believe as others do that the sun and the moon are gods? And Melephus says, no, you think that they're lumps of rock and burning metal. And Socrates says, you think you're prosecuting an Anaxagoras of Plasmony here? You're not. And I think Socrates, in Plato's account at any rate, does believe, likewise the hymn to Apollo that he composes. Also at the end of his life, also in the Phaedo. Yeah. I think he believes in these gods, and in the Phaedrus there's a whole complicated system of following the entourage of the Olympian deities and that kind of thing. And Plotinus sort of picks up on that in a couple of places. What Socrates doesn't like is any notion that these gods are responsible for evil or that they are evil. Doesn't mean he doesn't believe in it.
Okay, so just for the recording there, guys. So Norman was just saying that there's many examples in the dialogues where where Socrates, the character of Socrates, talks about the gods and the gods' influence and respecting them, and so it does seem to be that Plato continues with the belief in the gods. Yeah, Bruce.
Well, I think even the later neo-Platonists still believed in Greek gods. So it's actually confusing. Like, they actually have two systems of belief. One is philosophical, and one is like everyday life. As I said, Porphyry actually write a book to try to interpret Homer's epic in the light of neo-Platonism. So I think, they still believe in Greek God. So Chen Yu, do you?
I was going to ask. Okay. I was going to ask this question before, but I think it ties in with what we're talking about now. I was going to ask, how does that not monotheistic, but unifying theory of what is real, if what is real is only a unity, then how does it take into consideration like psyche or like soul and daimons, like even neo-Platonism? So how does that type of entity gets explained in Sufism or like neo-Platonism?
Well, for them, soul is actually part of the divine. It is actually emanated from the ultimate reality. So when a person was born, the ultimate reality actually emanates a small part of soul for him and put it into this material body. And
does it detract from the unity then?
No.
Because I guess it's not a logical relationship, because it's not as if there's a big lump that's called unity and then you take out a small lump. It's like a very complex, it's almost a non-logical relationship, right?
No, and I think it is also adopted from Plotinus, because it is called something called positive production. So although like ultimate reality produces this soul, but it does not mean the ultimate reality somehow become less than before. So yeah, it's just dogmatic.
Yeah. And the soul is also like, it's still a part of ultimate reality. It's not like when you receive the soul, you're separate from it.
No, not separate.
Yeah, like it's I
well,
guess,
it is separate, but it's also
not
still not separate. Yeah. And for demon, I think there is three worlds for them. So the world of the divine, and then the imaginal world, and our material world. So a demon is actually lived in the imaginal world. So imaginal world is like a dream. So they live in there. So they are real, but they are also unreal. Yeah. So Norman, do you want to say anything?
In certain Christian traditions, I think there's something to do with like oh happy crime, or like that it's good that bad things happen because that's how we get saved. And there might be something, especially Sufi Islam, that like the fact that we have been emanated means that we can be released. That's a good thing.
You mean emanation is it a good thing?
And the descent and the ascent are interdependent. You can't have one without the other. Like in Christianity, it's like for Adam and Eve to fall was kind of a good thing because it allowed Jesus to save us. That sort of thing I think is also in Islam, especially Sufi Islam.
I'm not sure actually. Like, I think descending from the divine realm for them is a miserable thing. Like all they want to do is to be reunited with God. So I don't think it's a good thing for them.
Oh, that's kind of pushing it in the direction of Manichaeism.
Well, that's what I was actually going to ask. How so for the recording, so Norman's talking about the ascent and the descent as in what happy crime in Christianity, whatever. There's good and good and evil are part of the same thing, a bit like perhaps yin and yang, although they're not good and evil. Yeah, I'm just wondering, and this is a good thing to bring up from your talk as well, because you mentioned Manichaeism, and one of the quotes, and a lot of people portray Manichaeism as fundamentally, a good force and an evil force, and actually one of your quotes, I think it was a quote from someone paraphrasing Aristotle, where I can't remember who it was, but they said that Zoroastrianism had these two good and evil gods, and you get that a lot. It's really interesting history there, because Zoroastrians themselves say we were the first monotheism, and in a way they were, and people have got various interpretations of this good and evil thing coming from Persian religion, how it came from Persian religion, and the extent to which it influenced Manichaeism. Yeah, so did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, but I feel in terms of good and evil, Islam is actually more close to a Christian. So for them, like, evil is just a pure privation of good. So it's not an independent thing. And there's no, like, another God responsible for this evil. But yeah, it is actually, like, it is very difficult question for theologians to answer. Like I know a professor who works at Australia Catholic University. Recently, he just read a book about the natural evil. So you see, even for today's theologians, this is still a problem, because we can explain moral evil. We can say there is moral evil because we deviate from the way of God. But natural evil, like an earthquake, is very difficult to explain for them. Yeah. So I don't think there is an answer. It's just a doctrine. Like evil is privation, and that's it.
So much Christian theology about that. Theodicy, the origins of evil and how it connects, and the fallen angel and the fall and all that stuff. very interesting. So the Christian position, that is the position that you mentioned as privation, is usually associated, evil is, well, it's just nothing or the absence, if you like. That is associated generally with Augustinian, St. Augustine's Christianity in the West anyway.
Yeah. And I think for them, evil is more like a metaphysical term. It's not the evil in our daily language, like doing wrong things or bad things happen, we call it evil. But for them, evil is more like an ontological term, like wherever the good is absent, it is evil.
Okay, yes, that's right. Yeah, so it's a translation thing. Is evil a separate force opposed to good, or is it just an absence? Yeah.
Yeah, like it seems they're trying to avoid the real question here.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else to finish us up? Maybe Effie.
I wanted to make just something that kept coming up for me when I read some of these, and when I look at the cave. I've been looking at Ken Wilber, who's a contemporary philosopher, and he talks about episodes of enlightenment, which we're all likely to have, and real spiritual growth, and he distinguishes them. And he believes that people tend to, whether they're aware of it or not, have episodes where they connect, but they haven't found the maturity philosophically or spiritually to stay at that level. And when I read things like, number 3, suddenly I saw the light, and then I came back to myself, and also Plotinus, I was bewildered to be here, compared to the cave, where it seems to be a conscious act to walk out of the cave, and then also a decision to walk back in to save him. For me, I kind of started seeing some of these as episodes of enlightenment, and the other one is a developmental stage of enlightenment or connection.
Okay, I'll just summarise note for the camera. So Effie is referring to the work of Ken Wilber, and Ken Wilber was talking about people having, commonly perhaps having episodes of enlightenment, but it's not sustained. And in the cave, Plato's cave here, it's very much a process, perhaps that people go through for a more sustained experience.
And I also think like the mystical cults, because of all the rituals and things they were doing, could fall into an episode, whereas, you could have a metaphysical experience. I'm wondering if this term, is there a difference between metaphysical and metacognitive experience? Whereas with Plato, he moves to a different realm of understanding.
So you're talking, Effie, about the mystery cults of the Eleusinian mysteries and the Orphic mysteries
as an
before
example,
Plato. They might have had mystic experiences there. Okay, well, there we go.
Yeah, I think you are right. Like for them, the mystical vision is more like a practice for the final salvation. So, as they say, like to study philosophy is to prepare for death, right? So, the logic is when you die, you rather go into the endless reincarnation, or you just completely be free. So, when you live, when you're doing philosophy, you actually like experiencing endless moments of rise and fall. And this is actually just a rehearsal for final death. Like once you're ready for these different episodes or moments, you will be like ready for the final death and salvation, I think. Yeah, but there is definitely connection here, but it's just, sorry, what was your question again? Okay.
It was commentary.
Yeah, but whether Plato's cave is different to that experience, because he's making a conscious decision to come back into the cave. He's not falling in. He's not bewildered at all by the experience. Is that right?
Right, so,
It's a different goal. I mean, like, Plato's cave allegory is about, not just about enlightenment, it's about then coming back down to lead. If you think about it politically. Whereas, like, the ultimate goal of, like, Islam, Sufi, is just to be enlightened. You don't need to go back and down and express what you attempt to express what you've experienced. You just need to experience it. So in that sense, I would ask, like, is there, like, how can we think about this as like a collective thing? Because it's a personal experience to have enlightenment. How do you then bring that back to the community element of religion, of like?
Okay, so let me have a go at that. So Jem just intervened then, talking about Plato's Cave as being, what you're saying, like a project. Well, let me just put it in my words, if you like. Yeah, Plato's Cave is all about, because you get into the next part and you say, how can we turn people around? How can we let them have this experience? We've got to go through this whole education process. Whereas when we got that quote, that famous quote from Plotinus about him describing his experience, he had this experience, and then what is the Aeneid called? I think it's actually called Why Me in My Body or something. He had this experience, and then he comes back down and he says, why am I in my body? Not why did I have the experience, but why am I embodied? So that's describing perhaps a particular experience, I think. Whereas I think people are saying here that it's quite a different thing what's going on in the allegory of the cave, where it's describing the journey of learning, and it's a journey in stages, a bit like the stages that we get in the symposium with the stages of love, until you get to this universal love. So I think it's more like that. I think it's what we're saying here. So, Bruce.
Yeah, could I just throw a wrench on that point as well from the perspective of Buddhism? Because I feel like the goal of going out...
You come and stand up here, because I like that.
Yeah, sorry.
Buddhism.
About Buddhism. And because it's kind of analogous, especially in the school of Mahayana Buddhism, where they describe a similar process where enlightenment is not... Well, the Buddhist project is not just individual enlightenment, at least in Mahayana Buddhism. It's to reach enlightenment and then to attain sort of the state that was described by Plotinus, where you lose the individual, you lose the ego, and then you see that you belong to the whole unity. But Buddhist has a weird turn, or has a different turn, because it doesn't state things positively. It kind of states it negatively. It's everything is nothing, but it doesn't then assert a reality, which I don't personally know how to explain this correctly. But then the goal of Mahayana Buddhism is then to understand this, and this is what was said of the Buddha. He understood this, and then he went and merged with reality, and then he came back embodied again to tell his disciples and tell everyone who's willing to listen of this realization of reality. So I guess that's another take from another mystical, philosophical religion that has something to say on this. This is a commentary, it's not really a question, I'm just putting.
Martin, I think you're right is here. Yeah.
I think it's about...
I'll just hear this answer.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll hold him off. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just about the paradigm shift. Like at the time of Plato wanted to bring salvation for human species as a whole. But in later generation, in the time of Plotinus and the Sufis, they just focus on salvation of this one individual, and also like maybe their students, like a few qualified people who can accept their philosophy. So yeah, there's no vocation to liberate human as a whole.
Well, we'll remember in the Republic, people have been reading it, where Plato says, Glaucon says, well, why don't they just stay up there? And then Socrates says, oh no, but this is the whole purpose of all this training. They have to come back and they have to run society. And then nearby, he then says, well, that's their duty. But anyone who's found their way themselves, it's not their duty. And so I suppose Plotinus and the Sufis as well are talking about a personal enlightenment and not necessarily coming back and having a duty to run society.
Plotinus was intending, or at least discussing with the Emperor Gallienus and the Emperor Salomon, setting up a sort of university town called Platonopolis. It will be run in accordance with the principles of Plato's Republic, or something vaguely like it.
Right, and so was Platon as well, much later.
Yes.
So yeah, Plotinus, Norman's just saying that Plotinus was actually working towards a Plato's Republic type situation. So,
and some people with Sufi leanings, I mean, Omar Khayyam was very close to some very, very important, political figures.
Oh, and yeah, so Omar Khayyam was close to political figures, and also were some of the big Sufis. They got very influential. The politicians had to listen to them, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think for Sufis, things is much easier because there is this teaching of Prophet Muhammad, and there is this book, Quran, which can guide people. So maybe for Sufi, they just wanted the common folk to follow the Islamic law and the teaching in the Quran, and believe that is enough for them. Yeah. So, and the mystical practice is only for few qualified people.
Yeah, we call it in the West high church and low church, I think. Yeah. But you see it in Buddhism as well. You give alms to the monks in the monastery, and you get virtue from that. But what's being taught in the monasteries is something much higher. Yeah. All right, Bruce. Thank you so much for that talk, and thank you so much. As people might know, our policy in these these salons is to go a bit away from Plato, maybe bring something else in and see how it relates, just to sort of open things up a bit. And today that has just been wonderful, Bruce. Thank you so much. And it's been great to have you only for a short time now around the Academy. We've really enjoyed you in the classes and in other chats myself as well. So I hope we see more of you and also of your friend Chen Yu over here. Now, I believe Chen Yu might be interested in doing a talk on Confucianism related to Platonism at some stage. Is there anyone interested in that? You're going to have to do it now, mate. So, thank you very much, Bruce.
Thank you.
Hope to see you around a lot more. Okay. Good luck. All right. So, if you've got any more questions for Bruce, you can ask him while we have some lemon tart or some more tea and coffee as well. So remember, we've got Platonism, Christianity. Hopefully we'll do a little bit of Islam in there as well. There's book for sale over there, and that's it. All right. Let's have some more food. You need to go.